So welcome. This is the Leaders Lab for the month of September 2022. The theme is belonging. I have a couple of announcements, just like church, like I say every time. Let me get my speaker on. There we go. Couple of announcements. First of all, you've probably heard the buzz that the middle school packet and the coming of age packet are up, and samples and all kinds of information on that is on our website, soulmatterssharingcircle.com. I hope that as you're beginning the year, you join our Soul Matters Facebook page for RE leaders. Lots of information like bulletin boards and where do I find this and look what I found for the theme of courage, that kind of thing. And the next Leaders Lab will be Wednesday, September 4th on October's theme of courage. So I wanted to do what we always do. I do an overview of the packet so you can get it verbally from me. And then we'll tease out some of the highlights of each session, and then we'll go into challenges, opportunities, and takeaways after that. So for the theme of belonging in September, there are 4 sessions. There's a belonging and water communion session. There's a belonging and not belonging session, which deals with the path of inclusion. There's the belonging to the real me, belonging to yourself, and belonging to the bigger picture, the path of the web of life. Those 4. So let's tease out each one. The first thing I want to mention as you look at the belonging and water communion session is that I know, for instance, Katie's church doesn't do water communion, and I have a plea to consider it the way that we are looking at water communion without the privilege lens and the, hey, I went to exotic Malta this summer lens. The reason being is we have so few really UU holidays. You know, we borrow Christmas, we borrow Hanukkah, we borrow all these things. And water communion and flower communion are the only 2 that I know right now that are more universal. There's bread communions, there's the ritual bag communions, which is going to be something I'm putting in the December packet from Sam. But water and flower, they're ours. Also, as you look at that first packet, you'll see throughout each beginning of the packet, there's a Google Doc for crowdsourcing chalice lightings. And I encourage you to throw things in that you like to use so that we all can share them. There's a link in every session under the Light It section. So the Wonder Box for the water communion is a cup of water. And the theme there is we are drinking stardust because the hydrogen and oxygen molecules that are made, that make up water, were made, hydrogen was made at the Big Bang. There is no new hydrogen in the whole universe. And the oxygen was made from dying stars. And in my life, in the lives of some of the scientist friends I have, this is very appropriate right now with the Webb telescope images coming in. So you may want to make a bridge to the Webb telescope. If you can find a before and after picture of what the Webb is giving us versus what the latest one was, it's incredible. It's incredible. And the whole idea is we are drinking stardust and we mingle with the universe. We also mingle with each other when we pour our waters into this wonderful bowl or whatever you're mingling with. Our wonderful Widening the Circle research team suggests one of the books. It's called Water Protectors. It has to do with caring deeply about water. And then I have a variety of suggestions and activities I put in the water slide that we used to do way back pre-COVID. We rented a water slide, and the staff and the board and the children and the adults all went down the water slide after the service. It was really fun. We have pictures of Lydia, the minister, just whooping it up, and all the kids throwing buckets on her. And if you don't want to go quite that big, you can turn on the sprinklers. Just turn on a little tiny, back and forth sprinkler, or get just do some hose play with water. So I just thought I'd mention that. Also, for this session and for every session, I encourage you to find a congregant with some connection. So who's your member that remembers some fantastic water communion? So in our case, it would be Wayne, who was on the board and showed up for the water slide in full flippers and snorkel mask and just flopped his way out of the sanctuary and went down. That's something the kids and the board is going to remember for the rest of their lives. So interviewing congregants as we're coming back from COVID pandemic, what it does is allow that bridge between generations and allow that personal connection to happen in person now. So each time, I don't put this in, but each activity, each lesson, each lens, please consider who in my congregation might be able to come and share something about this. The next session is belonging and not belonging, walking the path of inclusion. My go-to is the little poem that was always at First Universalist down in Denver. He drew a circle that shut me out, a heretic, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in. You can change the language to they if you don't like the he, because Edwin Markham wrote this in the 1800s. He's a universalist. And here's what I would do with the Wonder Box. Now, I suggest using something that nests, something that, like this Matryoshka doll. Now, I happen to have a dad who went to Russia, but here's how I would do it if I had a Matryoshka doll. He drew a circle that shut me out, a heretic, a thing to just flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took I'm trying to do it fast for the video. Him in. Oh, they all belong together. They all belong together. Now, my children and grandchildren love to play with that. That's how I would do the Wonder Box with a Matryoshka doll. Maybe without bobbling it, but hey, we're all human. Okay, I also wanted to show you one of the activities. This is from Crossing Paths. We do a circle of peace rope, one of the 3 lifelines. You put a good knot in it. I'm a rock climber. I know this knot is not going to fall apart. And you have enough rope so that every child can put their hands on it like this. And you sit with your feet touching in a circle on the ground, and then you stand up by stretching out together. The circle of peace rope. That's a really fun thing, and the kids loved it. And of course, they all tried it. What happens when you bobble, you let go or you pull too hard. All right, the third session is belonging to yourself, the path of me. And this is centered around Brene Brown's wisdom, where she talks about the difference between fitting in and belonging. So fitting in for her is sacrificing a part of yourself. True belonging is when you can be your authentic self. I think that's very important for our children to hear. Especially since my whole career, I've heard kids who have a youth group, a senior high youth group, and you ask them what they love about it. And universally they say, I am accepted for who I am. And when I try to describe youth group to someone who's just coming in and they walk in with a 16-year-old, that's pretty much, I get that phrase in. It's a place where our kids feel accepted for who they are. Because, as you know, high school and middle school is all about fitting in. So we want to be a different place for these kids. The other thing I wanted to mention, the book Odd Velvet is one of the suggested stories. This child is just an odd little child. But of course, what happens is she invites them to her home for her birthday, and they do fun things. They don't do the big commercial things. They build a blanket fort. And when I was GA middle school director for 50 middle schoolers, we had blanket fort day. That's with 8th graders. And this is what worked so well. We had a huge hotel conference room with maybe 100 chairs. And I asked the staff to bring sheets from the hotel down. And the kids went to town. They covered the whole conference room. They made a big circle with little spirals, and they put those sheets over and created their own blanket fort. And then we had nap time. We always had nap time with the middle schoolers in GA. And I think it works because they had to act like 20-year-olds when we went out to visit other faiths, and they were very responsible. And then they just needed to disassemble. Let's make a blanket fort. And they'd sit in there, and we'd say at nap time, you can read or you can sleep, but you do have to be quiet. So I had to get that blanket fort in there for you. The 4th session is belonging to the bigger picture. This, of course, is the web of life, centered on the web of life. I don't think we can say enough that we are made of stardust. We've said it in the first part, and I want this to be an important thing, because my personal belief is this is where religion is going to go in the future, is to this idea of the universality of the stars and how we are simply a part of them. We've got the James Webb coming in. There's a story called, it's that, What is God, that we all have like 6 copies at our church because people keep giving it to it. Oh yes, What is God by Etan Boritzer. Thank you so much. It's the 5th copy. So there's one suggestion. If you do use that, I suggest that you paperclip some pages together, because it does get a little long and it's sort of repetitive. However, those first few concepts are just wonderful. And then the second suggestion isn't a story, it's an Earthrise set of slides, which goes through landing a person on the moon. And it's very moving. And of course, they get the astronauts in there talking about what it was like to see that Earth from the moon first. And I think, again, that fits with, this universal message that maybe will help save our Earth. There's an ENSO activity. Now, I'm fortunate enough to live near Boulder, Colorado, and we have Naropa University. So I got a meditation instructor to come and teach the children how to make ENSO, which is the Zen circle, with homemade horsehair brown brushes that she used, and just the tactile sense of that. And what she did at the very end, she invited the whole congregation to come out and make a long, I forget what you call it. It was a stripe of the same black paint on a piece of mural paper. And each person would breathe and then hand it to the next person. And they would breathe and hand it to the next person. And we had grandparents down to preschoolers. It was a wonderful intergen after the service. The idea is not to make them fast, and that's what the children want to do. The idea is to bring your meditative self to it. So first there's a meditation, then there's the drawing, and it's one swipe. These monks make it in one swipe. It's not like, well, let's see. No, it's like breathe, stop. It's fascinating, and have lots of paper because the kids want to do it over and over and over as they start to understand what's so Zen about it. The other thing I wanted to highlight was the tree meeting activity. This is from Joseph Conrad, Sharing Nature with Children. If you are fortunate enough to have a few trees in your grounds, what this did for a congregation I served was expand the RE into the landscaping, because the children are blindfolded, they're with a sighted partner, and we picked trees for the kids to walk to and introduce to the blindfolded child. What's the bark feel like? What sounds are in it? And you walk them in a circuitous route to get to the tree. So they then go back, take off the blindfold, and they try to identify the tree based on what they felt and heard and smelled. And the children met the trees of our landscape. And we named this stand of pines the Enchanted Forest. And it became the place to read stories outside underneath this enchanted forest. We had some scraggly cedars, which we called them the rock and roll cedars, because they reminded the kids, and these were the older counselors actually, of Mick Jagger. So these were the rock and roll cedars that were sort of looked just like him, if you ask me. And then we had a couple of aspens, because we're in Colorado, and that was named. And anyway, I don't think most people introduce the landscape to their children, so there's an opportunity. All right, that's the highlights of what I enjoyed in this packet. I did want to, this time, since we're in the beginning of the year, go into what I'm doing with those picture books for all ages and soul work table, which is at the end of the packet. Big, thick suggestions for picture books. Sometimes I get feedback that the minister needs to know what the stories are in RE. So if you're lucky, the minister might use the stories for all ages. So we made a quick list, and that's also so Scott can grab that list and put it in the worship packet for the ministers too. So we're trying to create collaboration with that. Then there's another stack of picture books that aren't listed in a lesson that might give you grist for all ages. Then there's a third section of wisdom tales. And these are things from all different cultures. And there's a common read that I use called Doorways to the Soul by Elaine Pierman. And she actually came with us when we were starting to write the Tapestry of Faith sessions. She attended the author's table with several of the books she's written. She's a UU, and these are succinct, wonderful wisdom tales. So if you can, I recommend you get a copy, because I do refer to it in many packets. It's called Doorways to the Soul, 52 wisdom tales from around the world. We call it our common read for Soul Matters. And then there's a new part called the Soul Work Table. That language comes from our new staffer, April Rosario. Thank you, April, for letting us use her language, the soul work table, because they're a Soul Matters church. And what I do for that is take out all of the things that might be quiet, independent things to do, like a mandala circle drawing, like there's a frog puppet activity in the first session, like the Matryoshka dolls. Now mine are noisy. You hear that? That probably would be a little distraction. However, I have a different set. Or maybe you put candle wax on that. But Matryoshka dolls would be something else. A lot of churches are doing this because they don't know who's going to show up right now in this transition. They might have 4 kids come. And what a disappointment for the teachers who you've begged to come that they only have 4, you know? And you're recruiting volunteers and they're like, great, well, this was worth giving up my Saturday night for. So maybe you have a soul work table as plan B, or maybe you just plan through September to see what's going to happen with the children. Just as an aside, I did a training for a Crossing Paths church last night, and it was so heartwarming. Because heartwarming, I hope I said that. Heartwarming, not worming. Because they already have 11 kids signed up for Crossing Paths. And it's going to expand, as you know. This is what, August. There's going to be at least 4 more kids that realize, oh, it's happening, let's do it. So it's not everybody who's got these little tiny classes and no one knows who's coming. It's wonderful. I think, let me check my time. Yeah, that's plenty of talking by me. I'm going to move away from the speaker view, and I'm going to open this up to the challenges, opportunities, and takeaways / solutions that you guys might be interested in and share, and what we can talk about. So this is, you can learn. Yeah, David, please go.
I haven't dug into the packet very deeply yet, but I kind of like the idea of that soul work table. I mean, I've a nearby church has kind of set up a whole room with, stations for kind of individual exploration and that sort of thing, which requires a little more space. But this idea of just kind of having a few things around maybe a big table or something like that for people to kind of engage with, like, is a nice adaptation. I think it's less daunting to set up a whole room and that sort of thing, which needs to be staffed and equipped, or at least equipped, and updated or whatever, monitored. So I like that idea. So that's my first thought.
Nice. And some people put this right in the sanctuary. There's lots of people put it right at the front of the sanctuary. There's lots of people who put it in the back of the sanctuary. And then
as our congregation moves or has the desire to move toward more intergenerational kind of stuff, where it's okay to be restless or whatever, or to be not silent and sitting upright or whatever, that we have that in a corner for people to go to. That's a great idea.
Yeah. And doesn't it challenge the assumption that we're supposed to sit there and absorb information? That's gone, guys. That was the information age when we didn't have social media flooding us with information. And
so many people, and it's more accepted too, so many people need to be doing something with their hands or whatever. We have knitters, we have, whatever, right? And some people are kind enough to say during a meeting, hey, if you see me drawing or working on it, I'm not ignoring you. This is what I do. It's like, okay, that's a little bit more common and accepted.
Yeah. And some people call it a multisensory table. And yeah, David, I would be right back there. Of course, we're talking to the people who are multisensory, I think, from the get-go, and religious educators, where they're like, ooh, let's do the touchy-feely stuff. Let's do what do they call it? Smells and bells. I grew up Unitarian in outside of Philly, and mainline Unitarian church was very austere. I mean, they didn't call it a sanctuary. They didn't call it prayer or anything. It was sort of a Quaker humanist. And I think I grew up and that was my rebelling, was to become a Smells and Bells girl. Sam, what's on your brain?
Yeah, I'm also interested to see what's going on with the soul work table and the items that are offered up there. When we came back in person earlier this calendar year, we already had a space set up within the sanctuary that is deemed our joy corner, and it has the books and it has tons of fidgets, which that's the draw. The kids want the fidgets over there. Coloring pages, and there's the rug on the floor with a couple of beanbag chairs, and that's where we do our time for all ages. So it's um, the adults really actually enjoy having that kid energy in there. They've been enjoying that a lot. But I'm also curious as to what activities come through as I change up my groupings and my spaces, moving away from age-based groupings to modality-based rooms, and having that room that's our quiet space, our calm space, so they can sit there and do the mandalas. I think that'd be a great thing to add in there, and anything else that comes up for these kids that don't necessarily need the chaos, and they don't necessarily need the discussion and debate. They just need to sit there and almost be in their own meditative space. I like Katie in the comments saying ours is in the lobby. I took over the coffee hour huge table, which is awesome. They're not using it.
Yeah,
Someone's got to
awesome,
use it.
Katie. Oh,
Yeah.
I love it.
And Earthrise, I've shared that before and it's amazing. So I'm excited to hear that that's suggested in the packet.
Good. Katie, want to join us or just lurk? Katie Cartman. Still chewing. Thank you. I hope you'll jump in because I always like your good ideas too. There's oh yes, Sam.
I also wanted to send out a word of appreciation for having the story list that can be shared between the RE packet and the worship packet. Yeah, having the minister and our worship team have access to that is huge. I appreciate that.
All right, good. That's good to know. Yeah, if something never gets used, I tend to let it just sort of go away. What about challenges that you're facing for September? And for the theme of belonging or for anything?
I'll start that one off. I think the challenge is the great unknown when it comes to families. And in gatherings, like it's this big celebration, and it's the homecoming. Everyone's here, everyone's back. But things have changed so much, and our families they're still our most vulnerable population in this world of COVID and other things that have been coming up and around in different communities. So that's it's that big question mark of, are they ready to come back, and are we ready to be open and welcoming for them and patient? Some people get a little anxious of, where are the families, where are the kids, and just let's be patient. Let's give them space. Let's remind them that they do still belong, however they choose to be here. So I think that's the biggest challenge.
Oh, I love that. Let's remind them they still belong. Oh.
Yeah, I was thinking something very similar, actually. Just had a staff meeting this morning and we're going through a few transitions. We have an interim minister who just moved to the area and will be is starting up this week. And something she said was, when we were talking about registration and signing up and families come back knowing who's going to be there and that sort of thing, and kind of following up my comment that we made a bunch of phone calls in the spring to families we haven't heard from in a while to find out what's going on and what they need and that sort of thing. And it was hard, and it wasn't a complete everything followed. There were not enough follow up and that sort of thing. So, but she reminded us, like was just said, that just let everybody know that we're here and this is a place for them when they're ready and able. But when Sam was I resonated too with Sam saying, "Oh, people are asking, where are all the families, where are all the kids," and that sort of thing. And something the now retired minister at our congregation would say when people would ask that question about why aren't we more diverse? Why isn't, where are the people of color? She was like, well, those that you meet and know, please invite them to join us because that's where it comes from, kind of thing. So I was thinking, being reminded by Sam's comment that, when people ask that, say, oh, yes. And who exactly do you know and can you invite to be part of this place? Thanks.
Katie, hi.
And I'm wondering about a reframe moment. And I do not have this in any sort of polished form yet, but it's definitely one of the topics on my mind, is when we are hit with that congregational anxiety / well-meaning question. Where is the reframe? Where is the, oh, I'm so glad that you've noticed, and I'm wondering how you can help us to reach out and support our families. And that piece of, even if every single one of our families walked back in tomorrow, we still need to rebuild all of our infrastructures. We're going to have to rerun a background check on every volunteer. We're going to have to build a whole bunch more volunteers because how many have moved away or died or whatnot in the past 3 years? Those pieces, it's far easier for an organization to get caught up in kind of mournful paralysis than to think about energizing and supporting what we hope to build. And that whole, is it the Emerson quote about you built your castles in the sky and now to build the foundation under them?
Mm-hmm.
With your mentioning of like reframing too, I know that I'm trying to remember and encourage others to sort of adopt this and kind of come with me on this kind of journey, is that we're not rebuilding what used to be. We're kind of building something new now, and it's gonna look different. It's gonna have to. I mean, because we are not the same people we were 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago and that sort of thing. So I know when I started, which is just 3 years ago, there was already a group at our congregation, exploring changing the whole model, Sunday school model type of thing. And when I brought that up, a lot of parents were like, "Oh, but we kind of like this and this about the existing one." So, but I think this is kind of a ripe opportunity to make some of those changes. So one small thing that we're doing is we're moving like middle school RE from during worship, same time as elementary, to after worship with the high schoolers, and doing the neighboring phase or crossing paths type of thing, and inviting older folks to, adults and rest of the family or whatever to also be part of that. So I know the challenge will be to still create a sense of belonging or community among the middle schoolers themselves. However, there's always been requests and interest by adults to do that neighboring faith kind of exploration. So I think still not really knowing how many we're going to have and who's going to be back. I think that's the one way to kind of make sure that there's a critical mass to make it a program that's effective and
Nice. And David, while you and Katie were talking, it reminded me of some of John Roberto's work. He's a Catholic religious educator, and he talks about 21st century faith formation. He's published books. Many of us have gone to his workshops. In fact, out of 40 people at his workshop in Denver, I think there were 32 Unitarians and the rest were Catholic. But anyway, we're the ones who like to pivot and change. However, I'm wondering if with your reframing, Katie, we could talk about this. We're building a 21st century faith formation program because, and it's like David's saying, it's not going to be like it was. Now, those folks who want it to be like it was, we need to make room for them because, the curve of change, you're here and you've been processing all summer and these folks come and it's not a done deal, is it? It's like, well, wait a minute. So with patience and love, we move. And in my experience, it takes about 3 years for a congregational community to catch the vision or the good idea of the DRE, of the minister, of the music person. We're going to move the choir to this. It takes about 3 years. So think about it. We've lost 3 years. And so we haven't had that constant influx of new families that we do that make it impossible to plan every August because, I'd have 6 middle schoolers 1 year and then they'd all drop out and then suddenly 12 would come because they all showed up that year. It was impossible to plan in August, and that was always a anxious time for us anyway, is what's going to happen. And yet I love the reframing, Katie, that we need to work away from our mournful paralysis. We need to move towards the opportunities this is giving us. The other thing that might happen as we just see people dribble in is the opportunity to do what I used to call the very small but deep moments that you can do. When someone would come to me and say, oh, well, we only have 2 or 3 high schoolers. How could we possibly do a program? And I would say back to them, you can take 2 or 3 high schoolers to Europe. You could take them to Boston. You could take them to Israel much easier than you could take a high school group of 15 to 18 kids. And you can mentor 2 and 3 and ask them to be a worship associate or find out what gifts they bring and not have to have this sort of institutional system for them. You can just say, you are one of our beloveds. And if you have a reflective observer high schooler, you say, would you like to consult with the minister on her readings for the service? Or here's the sermon topic. What do you think about it from your lens? If you have an athletic athlete, like one of my sons was, throw them out on the playground and get a basketball hoop and shoot hoops with the kids so that they have a place. Or what was the other popular thing? Oh, yes, we had a pair of skateboarding youth. 2 guys loved to skateboard, and man, they would not want to do anything else. So I said, run a skateboard clinic. Oh, and they brought their ramps, their small ramps, and they demonstrated after church, and the kids were wowed. And anyway, I'm belaboring the point. However, let's make the opportunity to reframe having just a few children, just a few. See, I even said it too. We all want these humongous programs, but we may not have them. And yet we can serve those kids that come. Other reflections.
Appreciate that idea and everything. And I'm kind of wishing I had been in a place last spring when our high school group kind of dwindled in about February to just a couple, and they came together, you know, as the daughter of one of the advisors and a friend, and they're like, yeah, you know, if no one else is going to be coming, I think we're going to kind of hold back too. You know, we'll wait, take more of a wait and see attitude, but yeah, yeah, well, for what multiple reasons, wasn't a place to think of that or to yeah, apply that sort of thinking to engage them in a different way. Yeah,
It's hard because we're institutional people. By the way, here's a total aside, but there's quite an international thing going on Zoom for young adults. Gavin is a guy in UK who's the, I don't know, equivalent of like Eric Bliss for our district. He's the youth and young adult coordinator for all of UK. But he's partnering with Stephen at the UUA, and they've got an international youth group. They've got somebody from Cape Town, somebody from Prague, several from Canada and the US, and then there's Ireland and Wales. And I happened to grab one of those Welsh young adults to be on the youth packet research team. Her name is Sean, and she's got some great ideas. Anyway, just an aside. But imagine, so Gavin and I 2 years ago when we met, we said, maybe when COVID's over, we could have a high school exchange, UK, US. And we still want to do that. It's still crazy to do international travel, isn't it? And who knows what's going to happen with BA.5 variant. Other reflections?
I was just, you know, realizing that or remembering or appreciating the refresher that even though you might have 1, 2, or 3 children or youth coming in, that's a great time to build a relationship with them and to get to know them and allow them to get to know you or some of your facilitators, advisors, mentors, because I mean, that's what facilitates the relationships to linger after they might have aged out of your program, after they've graduated high school. Not all graduates take off for school. A lot of them will stay around now because it's expensive. But having, or they're going to school locally and having those connections to where I may built a relationship with this person and they've been very heavy into hospitality and I think I enjoy doing that with them and partnering up. And it's just one of those ways that, you know, wow, this one 8th grader has been showing up every Sunday and it's just that one 8th grader, but I've really gotten to know them and their parents, and they're so well integrated now and I know who they are on a deeper level that, hey, I can introduce you to this and you're introducing me to this, and it's an opportunity to build relationships on a deeper level, which is hard to do if you have 28th graders sitting in a room together. And you're having a good day if you remember all their names.
Nice.
I'm appreciating that reminder.
other things that might be takeaways from this conversation. And by the way, when I ask these questions on Zoom, or when you ask questions of your teachers or your congregants or your children, I do silently count to 10, because it was Kendall Gibbons, when I took a worship institute with her in Chicago, who told me that 10, a weight of 10 allows the reflective observers to feel like they can speak up. The reflective observer children are the ones who are the introverts, and they're thinking, and they will think and think and think. And if we, Gabby Unitarian Universalists, like to talk over them all the time, they won't say anything, and they're comfortable with that. They might feel a little left out. But if you count to 10, it allows that silence to draw out. So when I finish a picture book, even with little kids too, I do the same thing before I analyze. Just silence.
Years ago, I was given similar advice when working with children who are neurodiverse.
Mm-hmm.
Is counting to 10 to let them process what you're asking or what you're saying. And then you can move on from there. But similar discussion around our neurodiverse friends.
And I think explaining what you're doing too helps those students who are not that way to kind of understand and have develop a little more empathy for others around them. Oh, there's people like that? Oh, okay.
Katie.
And one thing a strategy I've seen, CB Beal does it, but I know they got it from somebody else. If you're doing this on Zoom, you do what's called chat lava. And that is, you ask a question and you give people like 30 seconds to put their response in the chat, but tell them they are not allowed to hit enter until you say so. Otherwise, it's, the quick typists fill up the whole screen and everybody else just goes, okay, that's already too much, and they don't enter their thoughts. But all of a sudden, just, okay, now everybody hit enter. It's like whoosh. Oh. And then everybody has that moment to scroll back and, read out some of it.
Oh, that's beautiful. Chat lava. Wow, that's great.
That sounds more like a chat gale, whoosh, as it all comes in. So I'm wondering, okay, have everybody type it. Okay, those of you who, from this state, or those of you between these ages, hit send. Just have a few of them come out.
That's
everyone else hold off. Okay, how about a few more? Yeah,
neat.
An idea.
Yeah, I like that variation.
Of course, it requires, you have to devote a chunk of time to it. So, but it's right. Like if it's not worth doing, perhaps, yeah.
Well, and it also, it could work well with the progressive stacking idea of, we all have questions and comments we would like to add to this, and let's try to hear from voices we might not otherwise first. And then the person who always responds to everything, they can decide whether or not at the end they're still going to share their thought.
And isn't that a piece of emergent leadership as well? The step in, step back. And boy, do we know both kinds of children too. The ones who will say every time, Yep. What's my favorite? Oh, here's one of my silly comments I always make in my family. I say, youth and enthusiasm are always overcome by age and treachery. It's a W.C. Fields quote. So anyway, it's only minorly connected to emergent leadership. Oh dear. Well, last comments. I think we're close. I'm grateful for your wisdom sharing. Thank you so much. And in the midst of all the talk of belonging and community that's going to happen in September, I hope that you and the children you companion feel a sense of belonging as well. Amen. Blessed be everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.